husband cheated on me, and I was devastated. I was angry. I cut, I crashed, I attacked, I stabbed, I plotted. I did a lot of stuff.
I'm a firm believer that charity begins at home and then it spreads. And then I forgot that part. And so I contributed to the distance in our relationship.
I'm just saying, though, I like for you to look a little more like I like for you to look.
I started realizing how faulty I was. The fact that I've been a contentious wife the entire time I've been married to him. I'm sitting up here running around being the face of gospel, encouraging everybody, being more of a really good Christian in theory.
Like, I don't need you for too much of this because I run stuff. I got the baby, so I got love. I don't need the other kind of love. I'm fine, at least for a little while. You know what I mean? Because I got her. You know what I mean? And so he was just,
with you next month.
He was just there, and so we grew.
Y'all, this stopped being a simple breakup the moment it crossed a line you can't come back from. This is what it looks like when a relationship doesn't fade, it implodes violently from within. Because what once passed as a peaceful separation between Tina Campbell and Teddy Campbell has now spiraled into something much heavier, something that's forcing people to question everything they thought they understood about this family. The documents are filed. The decision is locked. Over. But here's where everything flips. This wasn't triggered by a single moment. IT unraveled because of a cycle. Because right at the core of this, there's an alleged connection involving Erica Campbell that sources say didn't just happen overnight. It stretched across time, stayed buried, and hit far too close to home. And that's when this story shifts from complicated to unsettling. Because this isn't just infidelity. This is layered betrayal. Point one raw moment captures it perfectly. Voice trembling. Composure barely holding, but every word landing harder than the last. I didn't just lose my partner. I lost my sense of what was real. And just when it feels like it can't get deeper, it does. Because now the quiet talk is evolving into something louder. People questioning timelines, overlaps, details that don't align, and suddenly, even the foundation of the family itself is under a microscope. And here's the next shock. This didn't begin here. Insiders are looking back, saying the warning signs were always present, just carefully masked by appearances, belief, and silence. Another moment cuts through. I held on longer than I should have because I thought there was still something left to save. But now, there's nothing left to hold on to, because what once stayed behind closed doors has now unraveled in full view, pulling in names like Warren Campbell and forcing one unavoidable question. If something this big stayed hidden for so long, then what else is still waiting in the dark?
Out about it when we were taping the show, when we were taping the reality show called Mary Mary, if some of y'all don't know. We went through a season of her finding out everything that I had done.
The person who it was, she used to work for me. And so that broke my heart. She was like a godmother to my children. She had access to my home to come get my kids. And I said, "Are you having an affair with her?" And he said, "No." I said, "Call her." While we're doing this, I was like, "Call her." And so he did. And
it didn't shatter the moment the signatures dried on paper. It shattered long before that, silently, piece by piece, in ways no one beyond those walls could ever quantify. Because by the time Tina Campbell and Teddy Campbell made it official, what the world believed it was witnessing had already ended. From a distance, nothing seemed broken. Joint appearances, smiles that felt convincing, roles that never changed. But behind that surface, as it's now being revealed, everything had already begun pulling apart. And that's where the first fracture becomes clear. Because this wasn't introduced as a sudden breakdown. It was decay, slow, quiet, almost invisible, until something disrupted the illusion. Because the moment the alleged link to Erica Campbell came into focus, the timeline people trusted stopped adding up. Not because it had just begun, but because it hinted at something unfolding in parallel, far longer than anyone suspected. That's the first real shock. This wasn't about one moment gone wrong. It was about a pattern that, once exposed, changed everything. And that's where the weight of it truly sits. Not only in the accusation, but in what it forces people to reconsider. Because when trust collapses at that depth, it doesn't stay in the present. It rewrites the past. One line captures that realization. I wasn't responding to a moment. I was responding to everything I finally saw clearly. No yelling, no scene, just a quiet understanding, arriving far too late to alter what was already gone.
He was like, "Tina wants to know," and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, "Are you sleeping with my husband?" And she hung up the phone, so I had my answer. So it broke my heart. I destroyed 3 cars. I cut up and crashed up and tried to stab and plotted murders and all kind of crazy stuff because I was angry.
Since then, I found out about more. And I don't want to hold on to somebody who I cannot trust. You see, I have been trying since the very beginning. The situation gets a little worse, and then I try to forgive, and it gets a little worse, and I try to forgive. You gonna keep adding people? You gonna keep adding people? You gonna keep adding people? I thought we had a good life just like everybody else watching. I was 190% committed to that man. And this is what you did every time I...
But then the situation widens. Because the moment one layer cracks open, everything beneath it starts to shift. Not clarity, uncertainty, questions about timing, questions about overlap, questions about how long things had truly been out of sync. And that's where the second turn hits. Because this no longer stays contained between two people. It stretches outward. It reaches into closeness, shared history, intersecting lives. That's why the name Warren Campbell starts entering the conversation, not as a conclusion, but as part of something expanding. Nothing confirmed, nothing clearly defined, but present enough to change the direction of everything. And once that shift happens, the story can't be contained anymore. It becomes layered. Because now it's not just about what happened. It's about what else might have been happening at the exact same time. That sense of overlap builds pressure. And that pressure starts rewriting everything that came before. Because suddenly, the moments that once felt isolated don't feel random anymore. They feel connected.
And I was like, what if I kill you first? He said. He said.
No. This is what you said.
Don't do that,
You looked at me. You was mad because she was. She looked at me one time. She's like, "Don't you think you deserve to die?" And I was like,
"Wow."
I said, "Yeah."
Oh.
I said, "Yeah." I said, "The wages of sin is death." I said, if you kill me, I'm going to be with the Lord.
Because I repented.
But if you don't, I'm gonna make this up to you.
Moments that once felt disconnected begin lining up like pieces of a sequence. Distance that once seemed temporary starts to feel deliberate. Silences that once passed unnoticed begin to carry weight. That's how patterns surface, only after everything has already shifted. One reflection captures that moment of clarity. There were signs I chose to overlook because accepting them would have changed everything. And that's where the escalation takes hold. Because once those meanings become impossible to ignore, everything speeds up. Not on the outside, but within. Choices begin to take shape. Not driven by emotion, but by realization. And that realization doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it brings closure. Which is why when the divorce between Tina Campbell and Teddy Campbell was finally made official, it didn't mark the end. It validated it. And that's the part most people misunderstand. Because by the time something becomes public, the real transformation has already happened. So the question isn't why it ended when it did. The real question is, if everything had already shifted long before anyone could see it, then how much of what people thought they were witnessing was ever real? And how much of it was simply being held together until it couldn't be anymore?
He said, if you don't, I'm going to get you back.
Yeah, I'll make this up to you.
He said,
I broke it.
If you divorce me, I'm going to pursue you till I get you back.
I did tell her.
And I was like, I didn't know.
She knew I
know
meant it.
exactly where we were in our house when that man said that. And I was like, he means it. He do to get me back. He did everything he said he was going to do. He did everything that he said he was going to do. So in the spirit, he ran.
It wasn't the divorce itself that stunned people. It was everything the divorce began to uncover. Because the moment the split between Tina Campbell and Teddy Campbell became official, the narrative didn't settle, it splintered. The public expected resolution. Instead, they got layers. At first glance, it seemed straightforward. A relationship ended. Documents filed. A chapter sealed. But then fragments started emerging that didn't fit that clean conclusion. And that's where the first shift locks in. Because what was unfolding wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a foundation that had been quietly moving for far longer than anyone admitted. The alleged involvement of Erica Campbell didn't create the chaos. It revealed it.
In 2013, where infidelity rocked the core of the family. It's all on you, Teddy.
And once something buried comes to light, nothing stays the same. Because the moment the unseen becomes visible, every memory before it starts to feel different. That's the center of this entire situation. Not just what unfolded, but what it reveals about everything that led up to it. One line captures that shift in perspective. I thought I knew my life until I realized I'd only seen part of it. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just a quiet awareness that the reality she trusted was never the full picture. And that awareness carries weight. Because it hints that the fracture wasn't only betrayal. It was a disconnect between what was believed and what was true. But then it widens again. Because once one version of the story starts to come apart, it doesn't stop at a single thread. It begins pulling everything else with it.
As a kid, I filtered everything through it. Yeah. Everything. So when loneliness showed up in my marriage, I went back to the old Ted. That's exactly how it happened. So you have to...
Questions begin to surface. Not accusations, questions. About timing. About consistency. About how certain dynamics could exist unnoticed for so long. And that's where the second turn takes shape. Because now the situation doesn't stay contained within a single relationship. It starts expanding into closeness. Shared environments. shared trust. That's why the name Warren Campbell begins to surface in conversations, not as a confirmed answer, but as part of a widening context. And that presence changes the scale, because now the story isn't confined to one fracture. It hints at overlapping narratives, different perspectives, intersecting timelines. And when timelines begin to overlap, clarity becomes harder to hold on to. That's what makes this situation unstable, because it's no longer about pointing to a single breaking point. It's about understanding how multiple pieces were moving at the same time. And that's what pulls the past back into focus.
You know what I mean? A lot of fear that my wife wouldn't understand if I told her the issues and problems I was having. Because when me and Tina started dating, she didn't know that much about me. I hid that part from her because I knew if she knew that.
Because when you look back with new context, nothing feels the same anymore. IT starts to connect. Distance that once felt incidental begins to feel chosen. Silences that once passed quietly begin to echo. Moments that felt resolved start to feel unfinished. That's how patterns reveal themselves. Not in the moment, but after point one reflection captures that shift. There were things that felt off. I just didn't understand why. And that's the turning point, because without the full picture, perception stays limited. But once new context enters, everything changes. And when interpretation shifts, so does the meaning of everything that came before. That's where escalation becomes unavoidable, because the more connections that surface, the harder it becomes to hold onto a simple version of events. The situation deepens, not louder, but heavier. And that weight begins to shape perception. Public reaction starts to split. Some align with what's being said. Others question the timing. Others step back entirely, unsure what to trust. And that divide adds pressure. Because once multiple interpretations exist, the narrative loses stability. IT no longer belongs to one version. IT becomes contested. That's where things stand now, where information isn't just shared, it's examined, compared, reframed, and in that process, certainty becomes harder to hold, which leads to the final shift, because when a story reaches this level of complexity, it stops being about resolution, but IT becomes about interpretation. What people choose to believe, what feels consistent, what seems to fit, and that's where the real question forms. If multiple perspectives are shaping the same story, then is there one truth defining what actually happened, or are we watching different versions of the same reality unfold at once? It didn't simplify. When everything came to a head, IT became more complicated. Because by the time the separation between Tina Campbell and Teddy Campbell was finalized, people expected closure, a clean ending, a clear reason, a moment they could point to and say, that's where it broke. But that moment never came. Instead, what surfaced created more questions than answers. That's the part no one anticipated. Because when something becomes this visible, clarity usually follows. Here, it didn't. It fractured into layers. At first glance, it felt simple. A long marriage ended. An alleged outside connection emerged. The relationship couldn't hold under pressure, but that version didn't last, because as more details circulated, they didn't confirm the narrative, they complicated it. And that's where the first shift becomes unavoidable, because this wasn't just about something that happened. IT was about something that may have been happening for a long time unnoticed. The alleged link involving Erica Campbell didn't just introduce tension. IT introduced doubt, not only about the present, but about the past. And doubt reshapes everything. That's where the core tension settles. Not in a single claim, but in the possibility that two realities existed at once. Point one visible, point one hidden. And when those versions collide, nothing stays simple. Point one moment reflects that realization. I kept trying to make sense of it until I realized it didn't make sense at all. No accusation, just a quiet recognition that something wasn't aligning. But then the narrative expands again, because once it reaches this level, it doesn't stay contained. IT starts pulling in context, connections, relationships. That's why the presence of Warren Campbell enters the conversation, not as a confirmed conclusion, but as part of the growing complexity. And that's the second shift. Because now this isn't just about two people navigating a breakdown. It's about how multiple relationships intersected within the same space. And intersection creates overlap. Overlap creates ambiguity, and ambiguity makes resolution difficult. That's what defines the stage. Because once ambiguity enters, clarity depends on perspective, on interpretation, on which details people choose to believe. That's where the past takes on new meaning. Because looking back now, earlier moments don't feel isolated. They feel connected. Small inconsistencies begin forming patterns. Moments that once felt temporary begin to look structural. That's how hindsight works. IT doesn't change what happened. It changes how it's understood. Another line reinforces that realization. There were signs. I just didn't know how to read them. And that line shifts everything, because it suggests the story didn't begin where people thought that IT started earlier, quietly, gradually, building towards something that only became visible over time. That's where escalation becomes irreversible, because once enough pieces connect, the situation can't be simplified. IT becomes layered, too complex to reduce, impossible to tie to one cause. And that complexity spills outward. Public reaction divides. Some align with one perspective, others question the Timeline. Others remain uncertain, aware that not everything is known, and that division doesn't resolve the situation. It extends it, because now the narrative isn't just evolving internally, it's being shaped externally. BY perception to BY conversation, BY speculation, which means the story keeps moving. Even without new facts, that's where it stands now, where silence carries weight, where the absence of answers becomes part of the story itself, and that leads to the final possibility, not a conclusion. A. Questioned if multiple perspectives are shaping how this is understood, if timelines don't align, if past events are being reinterpreted through new context, then maybe what we're seeing isn't the full story. Maybe it's only a part of it, a version shaped by what's been revealed, but not defined by everything that exists, and that leaves one question unresolved. If the truth depends on pieces that haven't surfaced yet, then is this story really ending? Or are we still inside it? And now this isn't just about a marriage anymore. It's a fallout that refuses to settle. Because once a situation reaches this level, where timelines blur, where silence feels louder than statements, and where every new detail raises more questions than answers, there is no clean ending. Only consequences. Tina Campbell has said enough to shift the narrative. Not just emotionally, but structurally. When someone begins reframing years of a relationship in real time, people don't just listen. They reassess everything, and Teddy Campbell hasn't fully countered that shift. No complete explanation, no detailed clarity, nothing that stabilizes the story. That silence creates space, and that space fills quickly. Then there's Erica Campbell, present at the center of it all, but not fully defining her position. And when a name remains in the narrative without resolution, it doesn't fade, it expands. Now the situation isn't just about what happened, it's about what people believe happened. And those two things aren't always the same, because perception moves faster than truth. And once perception takes hold, even facts struggle to reshape it. That's where this stands now, caught between versions, driven by interpretation, and escalating without resolution. The real question isn't who's right, it's this: if every side is still holding something back, then what hasn't been revealed yet, because whatever remains hidden might be the piece that changes everything.